Hello, everyone. So, our guest today is Mr. Sabari Nath, CEO of Skillveri. Skillveri is a startup that was incubated in IIT Madras and during the last decade of its existence has grown to become a global leader in virtual reality and extended reality multi skill simulation. We'll come to the details in just a bit, but before that, let me go over to Mr. Sabari Nath. And I have a very curious question for you. Skillberry is a very interesting name. How did you come up with that name for your platform?
Yeah, so the beauty of this name is that it can be read in two classical languages, Latin and Tamil. In Tamil, very stands for intense passion. So Skillveri is about acquiring the right skill with intense passion. In Latin or English or any of those languages that take root from Latin, very stands for right, like when you say verify. So Skillveri is about acquiring the right skill. So that's the story behind the name Skillveri.
That's very interesting. So I wanted to know about your inceptional phases, perhaps. I understand that you founded Skillveri back in 2012. So being an earlier adopter of a technology that was still in its nascent phase back then, um, what actually inspired you to set forth on this path?
Yeah, so the need for the company was thought about by my co-founder 2 3 years before we formally started. So he spoke about the need to skill up people and the low level of employability of the students coming out from the hard skills training system. And later, when I read about this is early 2009, 2010, and it didn't really strike me. But later, when I read about a few statements that the Delhi metro, the tunneling work was done by people brought in from Peru, and the Delhi T3 airport terminal was built with Chinese labor. So that got me thinking on why a country of 1.4 billion with 70% of population in the productive age group had to bring in people from abroad for these kind of tasks. So that got me intrigued, and then I started reading up more on the skill gap and how brick and mortar approach cannot be used to scale up. So technology had to come in. So that's how we thought more seriously about starting this. And around the same time, somebody in the automotive sector had approached my co-founder and said that he is facing a shortage of welders and painters, and these are skills that can be taught quickly with the right tools. So could you do something with technology for that? So that's how we started. Yeah.
It's a very interesting journey. So you did mention the use of technology to scale up skilling as such. So could you tell me a little bit about what were your initial challenges at this phase? I'm sure, like although there were a few adopters at that stage, there were also detractors, so to say. So, what were your experiences back then?
I think the biggest challenge was to convince people that technology could be used. Um, and in India, particularly, I think there is a challenge that even training is not taken seriously. So there are companies which do a lot of work with hands and do a lot of manual labor, and they spend crores on the output from that. But their spend on training for those skills would be a lakh or so. So that's a huge disconnect between how much of investment is made into training of blue collar workers versus training efforts into white collar workers. So that disconnect was also a challenge. And we did a survey. We went and met with prospective buyers and asked them, do you face these kind of problems, and then how much would you pay for a solution? And um, the problems were worth in crores, but when you ask them how much would you pay for it, they will say 20,000, 30,000. Uh, so, but we knew that any solution is going to cost certainly much more than that. So we built a very early stage MVP, minimum viable prototype, and which could do only one type of welding in one position in a very uh, lab kind of an environment, and we set it up for actual welders to use and then get their feedback on it. And I felt that those feedback from the actual end user was far more valuable than theoretically knowing people. Like, I also discovered that engineering is very wrongly understood in this country. So engineers would have a lot of theoretical knowledge but very little practical knowledge. So the high school educated welders knew much more about practicalities than somebody with an MTech in welding or a PhD in welding. So that was also an interesting learning. And you had to balance both because the money is in the hands of the more educated people, and then the end user is a totally different thing. So you have to prioritize your features such that both stakeholders are happy.
Correct. I understand that you've been associated with the incubation cell for the longest time. How did you manage to leverage the ecosystem of the incubation cell to build Skillveri into a successful company today?
I think I would rate the reviews with Professor Ashok as the most valuable benefit that I have got out of the incubation ecosystem. And then I think the cohort of entrepreneurs that the ecosystem has built is also very interesting. Like, compared to any other incubator, the IIT Madras incubation system has a lot more founders focusing on things that are having some kind of a hardware angle to it. Most of the other incubators focus on software that's a mobile app, nothing beyond that. Not to trivialize that, but I'm saying that there are solutions that need hardware also. And so you not just get to get guided by the visionaries from IIT Madras, but also the cohort group is also very interesting, and they have some other hardware products. So there are a lot of learnings that we can share with each other also. And and throughout the product development journey, a lot of technical inputs came from the incubation system and the professors there. And then we also got a lot more exposure than we would have got otherwise. So almost anybody who comes to IIT Madras would come to the incubation cell and the research park, and we would get to demo the product to them. So these are access to visibility that is otherwise difficult to get.
Correct. Could you tell me about some of the flagship products that you've developed over the years and how they have evolved, say, until 2024?
Yeah, so we today are completely into virtual reality and mixed reality and the kind of tech that is now in vogue. But 12 years back, it was not so much in vogue. And we had to build a lot more hardware ourselves. And then there are challenges when you do hardware with a small number of devices built every year. I remember just a few months after I had started, I had to get a particular kind of display screen, and then I had written to the manufacturer asking for specifications and other things, and they said, they asked how many units do you need. I said, I could start with one sample and maybe I'll need 10 units in the first year. And he said our MOQ is 2.5 lakh units. Minimum order quantity is 2.5 lakh units. So at our scale, it was not possible to do a lot of hardware development. And in that sense, the fact that the virtual reality ecosystem evolved very fast with Oculus getting acquired by Facebook, and then HTC coming out with its headsets, Sony getting into the picture. So 2016, 2017, there was commercially available off-the-shelf, well-built products that we could integrate into our products, which could replace a lot of other sensors that we were building in low volumes by ourselves. So that the technology evolving also led us to evolve our products. And I think one thing we did really well was to quickly adapt new tech that comes out in the market. So if we see that there has been a breakthrough innovation in the ecosystem, and my team would look at that and say these features can be used to simplify our product a lot more. And so we don't feel attached to what we have built till now. We happily, willingly upgrade with what's available. So, for example, when this Oculus released this particular headset in October, that had a feature which will not just allow you to use virtual reality, but also see the real world and in 3D with a sense of understanding the distance also realistically. So very quickly, in about 6 weeks, we adapted our existing product to have this feature also enabled. And then we realized that the trainers were far more comfortable in that mixed reality world. So when Meta releases a feature and then in 6 weeks we're able to adapt our entire product line to use that particular feature, and then we have gone ahead and sold quite a few of those new models within 6 months of not just 6 months, 4 or 5 months of the external feature coming into play. So that's, I think, the speed with which a startup can respond is the reason why it's able to disrupt things that larger companies are well entrenched in.
Right. That's very insightful, actually. And uh, you did mention a couple of the products that you have come up with. I understand that your painting and welding simulations are very popular and they're sought after inside the country and outside. Could you tell me some of the highlight products that you've developed, highlights that you have had as part of the organization, and the products that you've developed which has become popular over the years as part of Skillveri?
Yeah, so I think the very first satisfying moment was when I think this was about 7 months after we started building it, and then we were showing this MVP at the factory, and um, we let them use it for a few days, and then we kept on collecting feedback. Coincidentally, there was some welding competition that happened in that industrial cluster between multiple companies, and one of our early users won the competition, and then he came back and told us and told the rest of his company that he won the competition because of the practice he got from the simulation. So that is a very satisfying moment that you have listened to the right set of people and it has made a difference in the lives of those people. And another set of people from the same factory had told us that we have always seen big tech being adopted for the white collar workforce. We have never been given anything high tech before. We welders are always discarded lot. So I'm so happy that you brought some tech for us people. So those statements early on were very satisfying, um, and then in a market like India where the price is a very tough part, and companies which negotiate very hard on pricing, when they come back and take more units, so that's also a satisfying factor. And the third was when we were highly India centric. We Others found us from abroad and started writing to us wanting our products, and we started selling it abroad. And then during the pandemic, our products were a big hit because the schools in US were sending out these headsets to the homes of the kids, and then they were remotely monitoring whether the kids were practicing this, because you can do theoretical knowledge over a Zoom call, but you can't teach a practical skill over a Zoom call. You have to make them practice. So that's when we realized that this could potentially be at a much larger scale than we had initially thought. So these were the highlight fields that we had.
So it's safe to say that the pandemic actually helped your business in a way, right?
In hindsight, yes. In during that time, it was a very stressful period. Our India revenues had gone to zero. There was some revenues trickling in from abroad, but it was not enough to pay salaries and things like that. Again, Professor Ashok stepped in, and he offered many of our cohort members a loan against our receivables. So most of us had receivables from various customers whom we had supplied just before the pandemic and lockdown. And because of the lockdown, the money was not getting released to us. So we got a loan against those receivables, and then that helped us survive and retain the team. Otherwise, we would all have shut down, despite having the best products in the world. So getting the right kind of support from the ecosystem and mentors, that's something I think is a very fortunate thing to have. Yeah, so in hindsight, because we were all forced to relook at our products, and then we made changes to the products to rebuild it ground up for virtual reality. So until then, virtual reality was an afterthought. We people are used to interacting on the computer on a 2D manner. So you use the mouse and all of us have learned how to map the 2D screen coordinates to the mouse and how to move the mouse. And then came the mobiles with the touchscreen, so you know how to do swipe and other actions on the touchscreen. But virtual reality is a different world altogether. So it puts you in a fully immersive 3D world where you can use your hands or some tools to go interact with something. So the way you interact with virtual reality software is very, very different from how you would interact with a touchscreen or a mouse. So that pandemic gave us the time because there was nothing else to do. There were no sales calls happening. So we were all sitting in office, and then we were rebuilding the software from ground up to make it optimized for a purely immersive interaction. None of our competitors have that, and everybody has adapted their 2D software to also work in 3D. So it doesn't feel as immersive as ours do. So in hindsight, yes, the pandemic helped. The US business boomed, and then product became better. So here we are in a much better place today.
That's nice. So picking up from your earlier point where you told us as to how encouraging it was to receive comments from, welders, etc., for whom you had developed products, So how did you think you have transformed or transitioned into the, transformed the what you call vocational training industry as such? And how was it for you to earlier to break into this industry? Because I'm sure it wouldn't have been easier in the initial stages.
Yeah, I would think that the impact of our products is satisfying from an absolute value point of view, in the sense about 20 lakh people have uh, used our product and have improved their skill and increased their incomes in some ways. But if you look at the need, whether it is for India or for the worldwide market, the need for the right skills in vocational is very, very high. And if you look at it from a percentage point of view for India, we have touched like maybe 2%, 3% of the total addressable market. And so it's the journey forward is even more, the in India, it's tougher to make it happen because you have to first convince people that training has to be done for your workforce. The fear is always, I will spend on training and then they will quit and go join the competitor. So that's the typically stated fear of the employer. So first we have to convince them that training has to be done. Then we have to convince that VR or mixed reality can be used for training. And thirdly, we have to convince people that our software or our product is better than other people's product. So it's a three-level convincing that typically takes 6 to 12 months to go through. And whereas in the Western world, it is easier because 1 and 2 are covered. They are already investing into training. They are already using VR and other tech for training purposes. So it's only a question of reaching the market, putting the headsets and our other tools in the hands of the real people, and making them experience and getting them to believe that these products are indeed better than the other options that they have. So the Western world, the task is easier cut out, but in the Indian context, it is even more tougher. But I think the long-term market is India. The sheer population and the sheer opportunity in India is very, very large, and therefore it's a long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So it's a very interesting journey, and it's a very satisfying journey in the long run.
Could you tell me which are the sectors which have currently adopted this technology very well, and what do you think is the future? How can you diversify this into other sectors?
So we started with automotive sector to begin, and then so we did welding for automotive sector. They said, whatever we weld, we have to paint. So can you do something for painting? So we built something for them for painting, um, and then later we realized that the same user needs both welding and painting simulators. So why not make it like a package where the hardware can be shared with only some attachments can be different. So for example, we have this welding gun that we have prepared, and it has a lot of hardware, and it latches on to existing third party products, like this white controller here is an accessory of the headset here, and it's wireless, so it communicates over Bluetooth to the headset and communicates what's happening. When I'm moving my hand, whenever I'm welding, the motor pulls back the rod to simulate what's happening. And so it could be an attachment for the welding gun, it could be an attachment for the painting gun, but the common hardware and software could be shared between these two use cases. So if you build a product that combines welding and painting, it may be a bigger hit than any other option. So that got us a lot more orders than we would have had if we had sold these as separate products. Similarly, when we started selling to the ITIs, we realized that a capex investment into an ITI is a very difficult thing. They would look at what kind of return on those investments can happen. So we pioneered in India that others have now started following, that you have an XR lab in an ITI, just like a library that would be there, common to all the departments in the institute. You have a common lab where the same hardware will be used by different trades. So then we built, in addition to welding and painting, we built for AC repair, which is also a very popular course. And then we built for solar panel technician, which is also a popular course. And we are building more simulations that can go into an ITI, so that the hardware investment is same, the software is incremental, and the return on investment for any school or an ITI into this technology can be many times than what was possible otherwise. So that's on the skill development side. Our expertise, if you think of it, is in being able to measure hand movements and then give feedback and give corrective training. And then there's a lot of data that gets analyzed, and this data can then be used to train models that can predict. For example, one new offering that we are building and trying with some industries in India is to let their workforce be trained on our simulators for welders and painters and other things, and then so the data of their welders' performance on their existing models that they do is captured. Whenever a factory comes out with a new model, let's say a car company is coming out with a new car which is shaped differently, typically they would go through a longer cycle with doing a trial run of production in the factory, and then physically discovering mistakes and other things, and then making the changes. So that takes a few months, as well as it stops the main production line. It has an experimental production line that can't be sold. So all this can be used with AI to predict on what kind of mistakes are likely to happen on a new design without actually switching on the conveyor belt. So these kind of add-on benefits are being built, and the same could be applied to sports training or medical training as well, because in all of these use cases, it's the body movements that matter. And how do you measure body movements? How do you train to have the right movement? So it's a common technology that can be applied across multiple sectors. So today it's more industrial sector, but tomorrow it could be sports or medical. The possibilities are endless. It could be yoga, it could be dance.
Is Skillveri working on any of these products at the moment? Any
Yes.
other diversification plans?
We have a very young and enthusiastic team, so they would always come with ideas, and we do brainstorming and see. Sometimes we build small prototypes that we show to the people in those sectors, and then if it clicks, then we start building it more seriously. So every year we'll be looking at some 10 new products that could be built. Only very few of them finally get built, because even if it is built well, there should be takers for it. There should be a market for it. Commercial viability is a factor, and so we always keep looking at new possibilities, and then we filter them based on market needs.
Okay. I wanted to understand, what is your revenue share like in the domestic market versus the international market currently, and how do you see that expanding?
So today it is about 50-50, 50% from India, 40% from US, 10% from Europe. The growth is much faster in the US than in India. So 3-4 years back it was 10% from the US, so it has become 50%. I think next 3-4 years it'll it may go to 80% from the US, but by then, in the B2C segment, India adopts things much faster. Like, UPI is a very good example of how India is a much early adopter compared to the Western world. But when it comes to B2B, India is a much safer play. If you look at the sectors where an industry buys, they want to go in for more established things. So, and the still mindset is there to adopt things from the West. So it's a longer journey that we have to build first. We have to sell it abroad and then get that credibility to be able to sell better in India. So that's happening. So I think after 4 or 5 years, the India share of our revenues will come back to being equal with the US or the Western world. And at some time, maybe 10 years down the line, the Indian share will be 70-80%.
Right. So I wanted to also, just for the benefit of the founders who are watching this space, could you elaborate on how your company navigated the challenges of, say, scaling and innovation?
Of course, we did it by making a few mistakes. It's not like everything went well. So we have faced cash crunches quite a few times, and like I said, we started with the automotive sector in 2012. We had conversations. We had people who had orally said they will purchase if you deliver by this period of time, and then we had built those things, and then we had been waiting for purchase orders. Then the auto sector in that year went down, and they said, no, we are not going to make any non-essential spends. So we were sitting with inventory in our office, and then we were facing challenges there. So none of the Excel sheets click and drag works. Like the financial wizards would like you to believe. And the only way we found to work is to build fast and build with the cheapest possible method of building things to see what works, what does not work. Sometimes the feature or benefit that we imagine to be very valuable turns out to be very trivial for the end user. Sometimes something that costs very little to build may be very useful for the end consumer, or maybe something that you thought was the main use case. The same feature may have a much larger other use case. So these are things that we discover by engaging very well with customers, and I would say paying customers. Earlier we used to do a lot of free pilots. We stopped doing that because the seriousness from the pilots was not good enough when it was done free. So we nowadays, for last few years, we always charge for pilots, and then we let the customer adjust it against their final purchase if the pilot works well for them. So that we found to be a good way of validating whether a product that we're building is useful to somebody else. So the biggest learning I have is that as an engineer, we are tempted to build a lot of cool things, but those cool things should solve real world problems, and somebody should be willing to pay for it. So discovering that is the biggest thing. Now, I would rate finding paying customers the quickest way as much better than finding investors to invest into your company. So that can come later. And founders' time is the big costliest resource. So if you have to raise investments, you end up spending time to chase the investors and make presentations to them. That same time has much better value in chasing customers and paying customers.
Right. As a company who has been around for about 12 years, I imagine that initially your pain points must have been severe in terms of promotions or marketing, etc. So how do you navigate the space of branding, promotions, etc.? How much attention do you pay to this? And could you tell us a little bit about how smaller companies can probably viably do these kind of marketing and promotions by themselves?
I don't have a complete solution, but initial days, I think the founder has to do a lot of sales. So founder-led sales work more effectively than hiring a brand manager or somebody like that. So a lot of things in early days the founder does, and then disclose what works, what does not work, and then you groom a youngster who would learn these things and then grow into that role. It'll be very costly to hire somebody who has done something similar in the past, and especially like we are a company that is not a mobile app company. We make software which also interfaces with hardware and is a product company, whereas India has been traditionally known for software services. So when you look out in the market for people with experience, they would have done something totally different. It may not, and that may not work in your context. So finding that as an experienced person either is going to be too costly, or it may even be too costly and not effective also. So some cases when we had the cash, we had tried that and burnt our fingers, and then what we found is to invest in youngsters who are high agency and high enthusiastic, and then groom them to grow into those roles. So that's what we have found it to be more effective. And some consultants and agencies are also willing to work on a success fees model or have a component which has a success fees model. So you may end up paying more in the long run, but then you are hedging it against your success, and everybody works towards that success. So it is better than doing a lot of retainers, is what I have learned.
Okay. So one more thing about the technology part of it, how do you see the scope of growth and diversification in the world of AR, VR, and multi-reality, and what are the trends in the industry right now? This is mainly for students who would want to pursue, something as a career in these lines.
It's a field with a lot of possibilities, and in the last 7-8 years it has come up. It has gone through hype cycles also. Like when Facebook rebranded to Meta, it went through a huge hype, and then it fell, and then it is slowly picking up. So I think there's a lot of scope in this. I think from a interaction with computing context, it is revolutionary. It makes it as natural as possible the way you interact with a computing device. Um, and I would again put the same filter. No, whatever you learn to build should have some practical use. Mostly, as engineers, we tend to solve problems that are tough to solve for our intellectual satisfaction. So finally, whatever you build, does it solve somebody's problem? Will somebody be willing to pay for it? That's one. Second is there'll be lot of hype that uh, some influencers will be peddling, and you have to be very very careful about does it really make sense. And mostly you don't need to have too much of technical knowledge to filter it out, but just a little bit of common sense. The use case with NFTs, I would say, was one such hype. There was 2020, 2021, everybody seemed to be doing NFTs and all that, and then now nobody's even talking about it. Even back then, a lot of people used to claim to be experts in that. They were trading in NFTs, and I didn't understand it at that point of time, and it was the situation was such that you can't publicly admit to not understanding it also. You'll be looked down upon. But so this so same thing is today happening with AI is what I feel. So both
Yeah.
AR, VR, and AI have a lot of potential, but 95% of what is shown is only potential. It's not real use case. 5% of real use cases are there. The students who figure out those use cases and build skills to uh, to build solutions around those realistic use cases will be the ones who succeed. The others will just get conned into taking some courses and then wasting your time in something else.
Right. So, for a student who wants to pursue a career in AR, VR, etc., what should be their learning course like, and what kind of courses should they choose, and what should their skill set be like?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty simple and straightforward. I would say there are broadly two disjoint skills. One is artistic skills, the ability to create the assets in 3D. The second is the ability to program. So this is somewhat like a movie or a animation skill is the artistic side coming to, and um, the interactions in VR are mostly programmatically done. So are you able to take the artistic output and then write code to make it work? So there are tools that help programmers to do artistic things, and then tools that help artistic people to do programming. So things like Unity or Unreal, they are game engines that allow kids to do this. So we could. There are a lot of free online tutorials that one could learn, and you can start building without any external help. And the headset manufacturers come out with simulators for those devices. So even without buying a headset, you can actually try and start programming on it. There are lots of resources available which you could try and see how easy you find it. I would always say fundamentals are the same every time. The tools may differ. So if you're stronger in programming and want to be a VR programmer, then just ensure that your fundamentals in programming are strong. Data structures and algorithms are strong. The language may change from C# to something else, but the fundamentals remain the same. So acquire fundamental skills, be it graphics or be it programming. Use the simplest tools to quickly create something. See if you enjoy it. Finally, you should enjoy it, not and pursue it with enjoyment than pursuing it because that's the hottest thing in the world currently. The hottest thing will keep changing.
Well said. So are you currently mentoring any startups, you being a startup yourself, so is there any startup that is currently that you're currently excited about, somebody who's working in the AR space maybe, or something else that is
No,
exciting for you?
I'm not formally mentoring any startup, but from the ecosystem, most of us entrepreneurs, we know each other, and then depending on what stage they are in, we do give our share of what were the mistakes we made and what are the things that worked out for us. So that kind of gyan giving happens informally. I don't mentor anybody formally because I think I'm still having to learn a lot of things myself, and uh, with overconfidence, one should not teach things that are wrong. So it's more of a informal experience sharing than formal mentoring is what I do right now.
Okay, great. But I would also like to know from you, what would your advice be to people who are upcoming and want to carve a successful path for themselves in the industry?
Any startup has to solve somebody's problem. So I hear many people say that I want to start because I faced this problem, so I built a solution for myself and I created a startup around it. So building a solution for yourself is good. Creating a startup around it, you do it only if you think that there are thousands or millions of others who have faced a similar problem, and you can cross check it quickly without putting too much of money or time into it. Second is there is a lot of glamour around startups in the recent past with too much of funding and valuations, and the focus being more on increasing the valuation than on increasing revenue or profitability. So these market cycles correct themselves. So um, now even investors are talking about EBITDA and PAT and profitability. These are words that were not used in the investor lexicon for the 15 years prior. So things would change. So instead of looking at the glamorized startup founder life, there are struggles that a startup founder would go through, and it will be enjoyable. But are you in it for the long run? Or are you looking at raising some funds, raising some PR around it, and then selling it off to somebody else? Uh, I have nothing to guide them for, but for people who are in it for the long run and want to make a meaningful change, uh, there is a lot to be done in this country as well as in the world. So it's a interesting journey in the long run. You make a lot more money in the long run as long as you don't get fixated on the short run. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon.
Oh, thank you very much for that. To just wrap up this interview, my final question for you would be, what would be your long-term vision for Skillveri, and how do you plan on achieving it?
So in India, we have 1.5 crore people joining the workforce every year, and uh, the people with the right skill is still a very small percentage, 10%, 15%. And at least one third of this 1.5 crore is coming into manufacturing because of the way the country is poised to grow. Like you see a lot of countries wanting to move uh, manufacturing out of China with the China plus one policy. you see a lot of free trade agreements that are getting signed with India, with many other countries. So, and manufacturing is one sure shot way of generating jobs and wealth. So, manufacturing will be a strong sector in the near future. And so, if the majority of the manufacturing aspiring workforce can get positively impacted by the tools that we build, that will be a source of satisfaction for us. So, of the 50 lakh people every year that come out into manufacturing jobs, can we do at least one third or half of them being positively impacted by us? That would be our dream to happen. Not a 20 lakh over a 5-year period, but 20 lakh every year touched by Skillveri. That would be our dream. And then extending this to sports and other areas where hand movement is critical.
Right. Thank you very much. It has been a very nice, interesting, insightful conversation so far. As you know, this is our pilot episode. So, thank you very much for being the guest on this particular show. We hope to hear more from you, and we hope to watch your, milestones. And thank you very much for being part of this show. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratibha.